Joining us again on the program is Daniel Estulin, investigative journalist, also author of the book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. Daniel, last time you were on, we very briefly touched on Bilderberg, and it really wasn't the subject of the interview. So you have the book. We thought we would have you back. We just had the most recent, the 2014 Bilderberg conference, which ended at the beginning of June. And I get many requests from the audience to talk about Bilderberg. And unfortunately, every single one of them also implies some huge Bilderberg conspiracy and cover-up. So I thought it would be good to start at the very beginning. What is Bilderberg? When did the Bilderberg Group first meet?
Bilderberg is a very powerful private organization which was founded back in 1954, shortly after the end of the Second World War, by North American and Western aristocracy. You could talk about the elite. And the idea behind each and every Bilderberg meeting is to create what they call the aristocracy of purpose. And the idea of these groups of people, Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, Pinay Circle, Bohemian Grove, the idea behind these groups of people is to reach through consensus, think of a direction and then use these meetings to somehow iron out the differences between them to create a consensus where all these powerful individuals far above government level can create policies that interest them at the expense of everybody else. Now, Bilderberg is a more exclusive of these, better known private organizations. They were founded, again, as I said, in 1954. There's 120, 130 members who assist annually to the conferences, out of which about 30, 40, they've been coming for years, people such as the Rockefellers, the Kissingers, etc. The rest, 80, 70, they're invited, they're chosen from, different walks of life, business, economics, government circles, media, they're invited. Bilderberger inner circle has a look at them. They decide whether they want to promote them in a sense of push their names, on the world stage. But again, what's known today as the Bilderberg organization is your old NATO alliance, Western Europe, Canada, and the United States. Other groups such as the Trilateral Commission, they include Americas, Europe, and Asia, thus Trilateral. They were founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller. And then there's another organization which is a brother to Bilderbergers. They're called Council on Foreign Relations. It's an American organization. But again, the people who attend these meetings are presidents and prime ministers of European nations. Sitting president of the United States never attends, but he's well represented by his representatives, be it foreign secretaries, secretaries of state. You have some of the top presidents and CEOs of the world's biggest corporations go to these meetings, European commissioners, presidents of the European Monetary Fund, European International Monetary Fund, European Central Bank, Federal Reserve Bank, World Bank, European commissioners, media, top media barons attend the New York Times, Washington Post, Time Magazine, Newsweek when there was someone. You have the Financial Post, the Financial Times. All of these big media groups, Le Monde from France, they all go there on the condition that the information which is discussed at these meetings never makes it into the public light. And that was the case until my book came out back in 2005 in Spain and 2007 in the United States, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, which basically, blew the doors wide open and showed to the world that these people exist. It's not some wacky, crazy conspiracy theory. There are no four old geezers sitting in a dark room holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination.
So, Daniel, is it fair to say, as a working framework for us here, we can say that this is a group made up of diplomatic, government, and business elite, so to speak, that dates back to the early Cold War, post-World War II era, and it is not unique. You said it is a relatively exclusive group, but it is a kind of diplomatic group that is not completely different from many other groups that exist. Is that a fair framework?
It's a very fair framework to say. And I just like to add a little bit to that. Bilderberg was a very important element of the oligarchical structures of the Cold War period. And that in and of itself is a very significant factor, because what it meant was that it was a vehicle through which private financier oligarchical interests were able to impose their policies on what is nominally sovereign governments. And that's something which makes Bilderberg unique as far as these private organizations are concerned.
Okay, why do you think, and this is just your opinion as someone who has studied this, why do you think that Bilderberg Group specifically has has lent itself to so many extreme conspiracies about whether it be one world government, whether it be a so-called death camps? I mean, the whole gamut of conspiracies. What is it about Bilderberg that has resulted in so many of these conspiracy theories, communication connections to the Illuminati, for example?
I think, generally speaking, when you talk about conspiracies, most of them are crazy conspiracy theories. The people behind these crazy conspiracy theories and rumors, they simply don't understand how power structures work. There is no conspiracy, although a lot of people, with their infantile imagination, would like to think that four old geezers do sit in an old, a dark room underground, plan the world's domination. There's a much easier way to explain this. You see, no matter where you look, governments, big business, and any other institution seeking to exercise power, the key to control is secrecy. Whether we're talking about G8 meetings or G7, World Trade Organization, World Economic Forum, United Nations, central banks, European Union Council of Ministers, European Union commissioners, government cabinet meetings, think tanks, foundations, all of these meetings are conducted behind closed doors. And the only possible reason for this is that the people who meet behind closed doors, they don't want us to know what they're discussing. But beyond the common reluctance, to reveal the proceedings of meetings, the secrecy principle extends to the forums and meetings themselves. And this is where, people, have their wild imaginations where you have, 14 or 40 people allegedly in a meeting that lasts 3 days plan the world's domination. It doesn't work like that. But what is true is that by and large, we don't even know that these meetings exist. And if you kind of look at the world, from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, a pattern emerges, which is easy to explain through how these meetings are able to maintain their secrecy. For example, World Economic Forum in Davos. That takes place at the end of January, early February. Then you have the Trilateral Commission, Americas, they meet in February. The G7 meeting takes place in March. The Bilderbergers meet in April, May. The Council on Foreign Relations, their quarterly meeting is also May, June. Then you have in September, International Monetary Fund, World Bank annual conference. And then October, the Trilateral Commission, Asia, they have their meeting. It's a kind of invisible international consensus emerges and is carried over from one meeting to the next, but no one is really leading it. There's no this eminence Greece. And the consensus becomes the background for the G7 economic communique. It becomes what informs the International Monetary Fund, when, for example, it imposes adjustment programs on, third world countries. It becomes what the United States president proposes to Congress.
Yeah, but even that, Daniel, I mean, I have to interject a little bit. I feel like what you're doing, and I know that you're not one of these conspiratorial individuals, but even in lining this up the way you're doing, you're first looking at the dates of meetings and then coming up with a theory of how the meetings go from one to the next in this sequential order and drawing meaning from it. Although it may just be a coincidence. In other words, you're finding a theory to fit the facts that is not necessarily the way that it goes, right?
It's the policy. The reason I explained it, backwards, but the idea is that when you kind of look at the events throughout history, and be it the price hikes going back to 1973 when the Bilderbergers met in Sweden, and they talked about pushing the oil price from $3.50 a barrel to somewhere in the range of $10 to $12.50 a barrel, and it's actually covered, the Bilderberg notes in my book, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, which is why it's very difficult, to talk about conspiracies and my book in the same sentence, because there's over 120 pages of documents, official documents, some of them coming from Bilderberg conferences, Bilderberg note reports, where they're talking about this. And you see how this develops over a period of time, and you realize that it's not the theory fitting a fact, it's the fact that all of these events, they take place over the period of the year. And the people who attend Davos are the same people who attend Trilateral Commission meetings. They're members of the same think tanks and the same foundations. They're also members of key government, policy, body-making institutions.
And I think that's no surprise, right? I mean, the way our society works is that the same people are in control of many aspects of government and business. Absolutely. But I think what's going on, Daniel, and we do have very limited time left, what I see going on is I think that Bilderberg has become a very convenient scapegoat for people who would rather tell themselves that there is this group of people that are controlling every aspect of their lives than realize, then hold on, Daniel, then to realize that we have some systemic problems, including inequality, which really is at the heart of a lot of this, right? We have this small group of people controlling so much. To me, that points to inequality. I think Bilderberg is just a convenient scapegoat.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. To blame world events and world crisis and the destruction of the world economy on Bilderberg is silly. Bilderberg is only 60 years old or young. In world history terms, it's nothing. When you look at some of these private organizations and really secret societies, you can go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. You're absolutely right. It's just Bilderberg, I think in part due to my book, became the scapegoat for all the malady in the world. But what is absolutely undeniable is that the people at the very, very top have a unique agenda. That agenda is siphoned through these kinds of meetings, whether we're talking about Bilderberg, we're talking about G7, we're talking about Davos, World Bank, International Monetary Fund. But the idea is that, again, the world is not controlled through democratically elected institutions. It's controlled by very powerful entities whose ideas and ideal of what the world should be like has very little to do with what is good for 99.9% of the world's population.
No question about it. To the extent that Bilderberg points to the plutocratic system that we have, I think it's absolutely spot on. Let me remind people, we've been speaking with Daniel Estulin. The book is The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. Thanks as always for joining us, Daniel.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.